When Lewis Hamilton signed for Ferrari, the world assumed it would be straightforward. 7 world championships, 103 race victories, the most decorated driver in the history of Formula One. Surely the thinking went, he just gets in the car and drives. But Formula One has never been that simple. And what happened next was one of the most technically fascinating and quietly brutal stories the sport has produced in years. Because Lewis Hamilton did not struggle at Ferrari because he forgot how to drive. He struggled because the way he drives the exact technique that won him 7 world titles was systematically destroying Ferrari's tires. And nobody, not the team, not the engineers, not even Hamilton himself, fully understood why. Until now. To understand what went wrong, you have to go back to the beginning. Not 2025. Not even Hamilton's time at Mercedes. You have to go back to the fundamental way Lewis Hamilton has always approached a racing car. Hamilton is a late breaker. He has been since karting. It is the foundation of his entire driving style. He carries more speed into corners than almost any driver on the grid, uses the braking zone as an attack tool, and exploits the resulting weight transfer to rotate the car through the apex. It is aggressive. It is instinctive. And for 2 decades, it was almost impossible to beat. But it comes with a condition. A car built for late braking needs a specific kind of aerodynamic platform. It needs a front end that loads up predictably under heavy braking, a rear that does not snap away when the weight shifts forward, a balance window that rewards commitment rather than punishing it. For 12 years at Mercedes, Hamilton had exactly that. The silver arrows were built around his inputs. His feedback shaped every development decision. His driving style was not just accommodated, it was the blueprint. Then he arrived at Ferrari and drove into a wall he never saw coming. Ferrari's SF25 was not a neutral car. It was Charles Leclerc's car, built around his preferences, tuned to his feedback, shaped by years of Leclerc pushing for a setup that suits the way he attacks a lap. And Leclerc drives almost nothing like Hamilton. Where Hamilton brakes late and hard, Leclerc brakes slightly earlier and manages the weight distribution across all 4 corners with what engineers describe as a dynamic, dancing style. He uses trailing throttle on corner entry to stabilize the rear. He locks the differential more aggressively to increase traction. He works with the car's balance constantly, rather than forcing it into a predetermined window. Leclerc drives a massively oversteery car. He slides the rears. And crucially, he does not have degradation. Hamilton said it himself during the 2025 season. Quietly, almost reluctantly, as if admitting a weakness that still surprised him. He slides the rears and doesn't have degradation. When I slide the rears, I get massive degradation. That one sentence contains the entire problem. When Hamilton tried to adapt to the Ferrari's oversteery character using his natural instincts, the late braking, the weight shift, the front-loaded rotation, the rear tires paid the price. His technique was generating heat in the rubber that Leclerc's style simply did not. And once a Formula One tire crosses its thermal threshold, the performance does not gradually decline. It falls off a cliff. The data from Japan in 2026 made it impossible to ignore. The SF26's hard tires were suffering greater wear on Hamilton's car than on Leclerc's on the same circuit, in the same conditions, driving the same machinery. The discrepancy was significant enough that Hamilton's engineers were forced to instruct him to lift off the throttle by around 15% at key points during the race, just to conserve energy and manage the degradation. Think about what that means. The greatest qualifier in Formula One history. Being told to go slower, not because of strategy, not because of traffic, but because his natural way of driving was eating his tires alive. And the cruel irony is that the harder Hamilton tried to find pace, the worse the problem became. Every aggressive braking zone, every committed entry, every attempt to find the lap time that his instincts told him was there, it all fed more heat into the rear rubber. And more heat meant more degradation. And more degradation meant slower lap times, more conservative strategy, and another race weekend that ended well below what everyone expected from Lewis Hamilton. But the tire problem was only half the story, because underneath it was a second issue that made everything worse. The simulator. Hamilton has never been a simulator driver. He said himself that he barely used the sim during 6 of his 7 championship seasons at Mercedes. His preparation has always been feel-based, data-driven in the sense that he absorbs information from engineers and translates it through instinct, not by logging virtual laps until a setup emerges. But Ferrari's culture was different. The team relied on the simulator heavily. And so, under pressure to adapt, under pressure to close the gap to Leclerc, Hamilton began using it. Regularly, dutifully, race weekend after race weekend. The problem was correlation. The Ferrari simulator was not accurately reflecting real-world behavior. The setup Hamilton refined over hours in the virtual environment would translate onto the track and simply not work the same way. Wrong balance, wrong characteristics, a car that felt completely different to what he had prepared for. That meant Hamilton was arriving at race weekends already pointed in the wrong direction. Fridays became catch-up exercises. Saturdays were compromised. By Sunday, even when the raw pace was there, the setup confidence was not. And setup confidence in a Formula One car is not a minor detail. It is everything. A driver who does not trust his car's behavior under braking will subconsciously brake earlier. A driver who does not trust the rear will not commit to the rotation. Every tenth that fear costs in a single corner multiplies across 20 corners per lap, 50 laps per race. Hamilton was caught in a loop. The simulator was giving him bad correlation. The bad correlation was giving him an unsuitable setup. The unsuitable setup was stopping him from using his natural style. And his natural style, when he did try to use it anyway, was overheating the tires. Race after race in 2025, the pattern repeated itself. A bright start, a promising first stint, then the tires going away earlier than Leclerc's, then the strategy becoming reactive rather than proactive. Then another result that felt like it should have been more. The Chinese Grand Prix in 2026 told the story in data. During the opening stint on medium tires, Mercedes showed remarkably stable lap times throughout. Ferrari's times began climbing relatively early. Both Hamilton and Leclerc were caught in the same degradation window. But the underlying cause on Hamilton's side was clear to anyone who looked closely at the telemetry. His technique was generating more heat than the tire could sustainably manage. Something had to change. And eventually, Hamilton made a decision that went against everything Ferrari's engineering culture had told him to do. He stopped using the simulator. Ahead of the 2026 Canadian Grand Prix, Hamilton and his engineers took a completely different approach. Instead of simulator runs, they spent time going through real-world data, analyzing telemetry from previous races, understanding not what the virtual models suggested, but what the actual SF26 was doing on track, corner by corner, sector by sector. He also made changes to his physical preparation. A deep dive into the Ferraris through corner balance, mechanical balance work, corner approach refinement, brake balance optimization, and critically a more integrated working relationship with his engineering team, led by his new race engineer Carlos Santi. The results in Montreal were immediate and undeniable. Hamilton topped the first sprint qualifying segment ahead of George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. He carried that pace through to SQ3, where he was within 0.172 of a second of the Mercedes pair and looked genuinely capable of stealing pole. In the race, he charged from 5th on the grid, passed Oscar Piastri on the opening lap, and then on fresh medium tires hunted down Max Verstappen in the closing stages to take second place. The tire management that had tortured him for over a year was suddenly there. The confidence under braking was back. The stability through the low-speed sections that Montreal demands was present. Hamilton was using the SF26's exceptional mid-corner adjustability, the best on the grid, in exactly the way it was designed to be used. He called it the happiest day of his Ferrari career so far, and after the race, he was unambiguous about why. He said he felt he was probably better without the simulator. That simulator feedback was not the same as real-world feedback. That his instincts, his experience, his direct feel for the car under him, those were the tools that had won him 7 championships. And those were the tools he needed to be using. But here is where the story demands honesty. Because Montreal is not the full picture. Canada is one of Hamilton's most successful circuits, 3 wins, and a podium record that puts it among his very best venues. The SF26's strengths map almost perfectly onto what Montreal demands: low-speed traction, mid-corner adjustability, strong braking stability. The track surface and corner characteristics happen to suit Hamilton's natural style in a way that reduces the tire loading problem rather than exposing it. Leclerc was not at his best in Canada. He admitted it himself. Melbourne and Montreal are the 2 circuits where he finds it hardest to mesh his driving style with the track character. So the gap between them in Montreal was partly Hamilton finding his form, and partly Leclerc at a track that does not play to his strengths. The real question is what happens at circuits that do not fit Hamilton's natural approach so neatly. At tracks with long high-speed sections where tire loading is higher and thermal management is more critical. At circuits where Leclerc's rear-led style gives him a natural edge that no amount of data analysis and simulator skipping can fully overcome. The engineering work that Ferrari and Hamilton have done together is real. The new race-engineer relationship is working. The shift away from the simulator is giving him better correlation. The SF26, designed for 2026's aerodynamic rules, is genuinely more compatible with Hamilton's technique than the SF25 ever was. The ground effect era, which had punished late brakers and big steering inputs since 2022, is gone. These new cars have different suspension philosophies, more compliant characteristics, and a balance window that no longer requires the flatness of platform that made Hamilton's style so costly. His muscle memory, which had been working against him for 4 years, is suddenly appropriate again. Hamilton said he finally has the engineering team he has been working towards. That, he feels light, mentally, in a good place. That for the first time, he feels the car has his DNA in it, because last year he inherited a machine he had no hand in developing. All of that matters. All of that is progress. But the tire problem has not been solved. It has been managed. And management is not the same as a solution. The underlying tension between Hamilton's natural instincts and the thermal demands of the Ferrari's rear rubber has not disappeared. It has been navigated around through better data use, better setup correlation, and the good fortune of a circuit that happened to reward his strengths. The next few races will tell us which version of this story is true. If Hamilton can maintain the tire management and the pace at circuits that are less naturally suited to him, at tracks where Leclerc's style gives him a structural advantage, then something has genuinely changed. The loop has been broken. The technical problem has been understood deeply enough that it can be mitigated consistently. But if the degradation returns at the next demanding circuit, if the rear tires start going away early again, if the gap to Leclerc opens back up in the second half of races, then Canada, like Shanghai before it, will be another data point in a longer, more complicated story. What is certain is this: the problem was never Lewis Hamilton's speed, it was never his racecraft, it was never the instinct that built one of the greatest careers the sport has ever seen. It was a mismatch between the most successful driver in Formula One history and a car that had been shaped over years around someone else entirely. Fixing that mismatch, truly fixing it, not just managing it at friendly circuits, is the technical challenge that will define the rest of Lewis Hamilton's Ferrari chapter. And for the first time in 18 months, there is genuine reason to believe it might actually be happening.